Welcome, guys. Welcome back to another episode with your Young Guns podcast. Today is one of the last trade destination videos we'll be doing, unless there's like more names that are announced as we get close to the trade deadline. But essentially, we've covered the majority of the top names available heading towards the trade deadline this year. So we're gonna be talking about JT Miller. Just wanted to say thanks again to all the subscribers that have been supporting us from the start. Uh, we're almost at 500, which is the halfway line or halfway point to our goal of 1K, which is fantastic to do literally within our first 5 months. So let's keep it up, guys, and let's get into it. So JT Miller is turning 29 years old in March. He's currently getting paid 5.25 mil, and his contract ends after the 2022-2023 NHL season. So he has an additional year once the
Yep.
season's complete. Frank Seravallii of the Daily Faceoff did a radio interview on Sportsnet 650, and he listed the Boston Bruins, Minnesota Wild, Calgary Flames, and as potential suitors essentially. And then a couple weeks later, he announced that the Rangers discussed the possibility of reacquiring JT Miller. So he had this to state. I think for the value that he could be going for is essentially a first round pick, any highly touted prospect, and Donnie and Daly, who are based in Vancouver. They covered the Canucks. They said that the Miller camp is aware of the trade rumors surrounding JT Miller, but rumors of him wanting out of Vancouver are not true. It all comes down to Vancouver of whether or not they pull the trigger. So it's all up to Vancouver, basically. Rutherford is president of the Vancouver Canucks. They announced their GM 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Patrick Alvin, a former assistant GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, so he was announced as GM.
And Rutherford also stated that like this is a team that he does not want to rebuild. He wants to win with this team. The question is, will he move one of his core pieces in order to alter some changes and try to retool his team in a
Yeah.
sense? Or will he keep the team that he has right now and make minor adjustments, hoping that with Bruce Boudreau, who they've been playing honestly way better with or under, sorry,
Mhm.
hopefully they could clinch a playoff spot essentially somewhere within the two last wild card spots in the Western Conference.
Well,
So let's start with the Boston Bruins.
well,
You guys
before that, I just wanted to say something. So, JT Miller's a really good player. I mean, he's been fantastic over the last couple of seasons there, especially since he joined Vancouver. Daniel, yes, I don't know if Chris is a Cubs fan. I think he can answer that question. Chris, do you want to answer that question? Are you a Cubs fan?
Am I a Cubs fan? Well, to be honest, I have a collection of baseball caps, but this is one of my favorite ones. I'm actually a New York Yankees fan when it comes to baseball. I know I'm kind of a bandwagon, but
Anyways, but he's got the Cubs hat on. But anyways,
yeah.
going back to what I was saying about JT Miller. Look, the guy's been fantastic over the last 3 seasons for
I don't
Vancouver.
think we could be friends anymore. It's unfortunately.
I have. Well, listen, I have a
We're
Red
turning into a
Sox.
baseball podcast.
I still have a Red Sox cap too. I have a collection of that. I got the Marlins too. I went to see a couple of Marlins games as well.
Ben
Anyways,
Affleck and Matt Damon would tell you, pick a goddamn team
yeah.
already, and it better be the Red Sox.
anyways, anyways, going back to what I was saying about JT Miller. Look, he's been great over the last couple of seasons, especially, and he had a decent time in New York. He had some decent seasons there. Went to Tampa Bay and played really really well over there too, and he's been fantastic in Vancouver. I think what's interesting with JT Miller is that, like you said, right, he's got a year left. He's got a year left after this one on his contract. And obviously, Rutherford turned around and said that maybe they're not willing to rebuild. But the thing is, you've got a player in JT Miller who's going to get a lot of value. Teams are going to be interested in him, and obviously, I think he's a player that can help you win a cup right now. And you look at the teams that are interested in him. The Boston Bruins, the Calgary Flames, the New York Rangers as well. Like, there's a lot of really good teams and a lot of highly touted teams that are interested in this player. And I honestly think, like you said, starting with the Boston Bruins, I think the Boston Bruins are an interesting little team that could potentially go after JT Miller. They've got some.
Little
Little
what?
team.
Boston Bruins little?
No, I'm saying
Take that
I'm
back
saying in
before they
terms
come
of
after you. You know the fan base.
no, but I'm saying little in the sense that in my opinion, I think out of all the teams that are there in the playoff run and all the teams that should be interested in JT Miller, I think the Bruins are to, you know, less likely to, win a cup, in my opinion, even if they bring in a guy like JT Miller. But going back to what I was saying is, I think the Bruins can offer some really good players. There's Jeremy Swayman, who's an option for Vancouver if they're looking to go that route. There's Fabian Liesel as well, who they drafted 21st overall. There's even Mason Loray, who's a defenseman that plays in the NCAA. There's been some big questions as to whether or not, Vancouver wants to move JT Miller, whether he wants to leave. Obviously, he said no. I think Vancouver, at the end of the day, it's going to be whether or not they get a really good deal for him. I don't think they should trade him personally. I think he's on a steal of a contract. So we'll see. The other question is, right, coming from Brave187, he says, my sticking point is how much is he going to ask for when he resigns? In my opinion, my honest opinion, I think he's worth probably more than $7 million, or between 7 and 8. And the reason why is, look, he's a point a game player this year. Last year he had 46 points in 52 games. The year before that, he was more than a point a game player. We're talking about a guy here whose last 3 seasons has played some elite hockey on a team that's been very
Complete
average.
steal for the Vancouver Canucks,
That's
by the
it.
way. That was
And
one of what was his
he's
name?
been
Jesus,
a great player.
what was that GM's name that got fired?
Jim Benning.
Yeah, that was literally his best move, in my opinion.
Yeah, but that's what it is, and I think
He fleeced Yzerman. Imagine that. I think that's the one deal that Yzerman lost.
Yeah,
I honestly think
Tampa still won 2 cups, though.
Yeah, I know, but if we're looking at the deal itself, I think that was a steal of a deal.
Well, I mean,
I think was Tampa trying to do a cap dump? What was the purpose of that deal? Like, what the?
Yeah, well, I think it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact trade. I think if we can pull it up,
There was a first round pick included. I'm aware of that, and I think they used that pick, Tampa Bay, to flip it to acquire David Savard, if I'm not mistaken,
It was a dump.
or something like I don't
Brave
know.
187 said it was a dump. You know what?
Yeah, it was a dump.
Yeah,
I was pretty sure it was a dump because there was no way. You know.
You don't dump a guy like JT Miller. That's the thing.
Well, I mean, look,
know?
if you're in Tampa's case, Tampa had a bunch of their salary cap issues lately over the last couple of years haven't been great. So I understand it from that perspective. And also Vancouver was kind of going for a playoff push at that point as well. So getting a guy like JT Miller kind of helped them. But I mean, look, he's been great. And I think that a team like Boston would make a lot of sense. But even at that, I don't know if Boston's willing to move a guy like Swayman or Fabian Liesel or even Mason Loray. So I don't know about the Bruins, but they're definitely an interesting team.
Here's what I think. I think they keep him this season. I don't see him getting moved. If he does get moved, they better be getting a lot in return. But which honestly, some of the contending teams besides the Rangers, I don't see any other team really. Or maybe they're not really. I was putting it. We put it as one of this was going to be one of my predictions, but I think the Red Wings somewhat can get JT Miller.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that because that's interesting.
But to make it fast, unless let's say he doesn't get traded now, I see them potentially maybe. And if they don't trade him at the draft either, I see them if they don't get an extension done. Then I would see a move maybe next year. He still has with this year he still has another year left. So I don't really see them pulling the trigger right away unless the new GM really wants to shake things up. Then he would be the odd man out since he is the oldest out of all the best performing guys on that team.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something they have to internally discuss as a team and with the management as well. Brave 187. That was a good joke actually. That they had so much debt that they literally could have afforded to dump a guy. Imagine dumping a guy like JT Miller to Vancouver. Tampa. Just Yzerman built a juggernaut.
I mean,
this brought over, but fantastic team. So. Yeah,
I don't
that's a
really
great
think
one,
Tampa cares
honestly.
though. Like Chris said, they won 2 cups, so I don't really think they're too bothered by it. But I
Yeah.
think the other thing is too, right? You look at JT Miller, and I'm gonna say one more thing before we move on to the next team.
Well, I didn't
Um,
get to say my take on Boston.
well, yeah, that's it. So I'll give you your chance. Just give me a sec here. So
Okay.
uh, all
I
I
don't
know
think
is
he's
that
going there though.
is that
Sorry.
the reason
And we're all over the place
Miller,
tonight.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean, the reason why I think JT Miller is going to get traded, in my opinion, and just because it makes sense, Brock Besser is owed a $7.5 million qualifying offer, and I know that there's rumors about him potentially, being traded as well. There's been talks about that alongside Vancouver. I personally think that you should give Brock Besser a chance in Vancouver. He's a good player. I think with the right system, he's played well under Boudreau as well. I think it's an opportunity where if Vancouver wants to, find a way to re-sign Brock Besser, then you got to move a guy like JT Miller. And I think at the end of the day, you'll get a lot for a guy like JT Miller. He's worth a lot. He's an elite player, in my opinion. I think he's proven that over the last 3 years. So yeah, I'm just giving context as to why I think Vancouver does move him, because they have to sign Besser, they have to sign Bo Horvat in 2 years as well. So there's some guys that they have to bring in, and obviously Pedersen and Hughes as well are on big contracts, and the Canucks kind of have cap problems as well. So that's it. And I mean, look, they're at the highest value right now too. Like Brave said, it's smart for them to move JT Miller right now because he's got the best value possible. Anyways, Chris, what do you want to say about the Bruins?
Yeah, so we all know the whole situation with David Krejci leaving. It kind of put Boston in a hole considering their center depth. Taylor Hall played really well with Krejci. So, they were fumbling the lines a little bit this year, trying to figure out who they're going to put as a second line center. It seems like Eric Halla is currently the fit as a second line center, playing with Pasternak and Hall. Is Eric Halla a second line center? No way. Okay. And here's
Yeah,
why. Okay. Eric Halla, at best, is a third line center, but that's
yeah.
Charlie Coyle's spot. So if you acquire JT Miller, immediately he becomes a second line center and
You,
you
you
put him
think
on that
Boston?
line.
You think Boston plays him as a center?
Yeah, 100%. That's what they need. He could
I mean,
play
because he's
left
more
wing,
of a
the
winger in my
center,
opinion.
and the right wing. So
Yeah.
this guy's, he's a Swiss Army knife essentially. And again, um, that's what makes his value so much more higher because he's able to play different positions. So getting him there, playing on a line of Pasternak and Hall, that's just insane in my
Yeah.
opinion. And especially on the power play, holy crap! I think that would be fantastic. Then you have Fabian Lysell that you were talking about. Honestly, he should be off limits because he's literally their best prospect in the system. I think he's the only guy that has NHL potential to make the Bruins roster in the
Now
future.
there's Mason Loray too is a decent defenseman. Maybe he gets into some NHL games in the future. But
So
yeah,
maybe they're not afraid to dangle him if they know this is probably like their last chance, knowing that Bergeron is his future's up in the air because he's a UFA. Marchand's getting up there in age. Rask, this could be his potential last year.
yeah.
So trading a first round pick and a prospect for JT Miller, going for that last run, and having Miller under contract next year. I think that would be a fantastic deal for the Boston Bruins. But honestly, if I'm the Boston Bruins, this is what I offer them: first round pick, DeBrusque, and Lysell, because the deal has to include a prospect
Mm.
according to Vancouver's demands. So I think DeBrusque fell out of favor. We made a video on that. So if I think they offer that as a deal, I think that makes sense for
I think
Vancouver to
that's too.
accept.
I'll be honest. I think that's too much. I think
I
if
don't think it's too much. I
I
mean, if
think
Lekkonen's going for a prospect in the
yeah,
first,
but
this guy
but
should
what
be
I'm
getting
saying
a
is
hell of a lot more.
yeah, but what I'm saying is if you're trading a first round pick, Jake DeBrusque and Fabian Lysell, you're putting way like Fabian Lysell's a really good prospect,
But you have to
and
understand
so
it's gonna be
that's
a
kind of
bidding
why I
war
don't
for
think
JT
so.
Miller. It's gonna be
Yeah,
a
but
bidding war.
I see
You
them
gotta
more
have a
trading a
good
guy like
offer. Can't
I see
offer
them
him
more
crap.
trading a
And
guy like
speaking of bidding wars, I'd like to move to the prediction. Sorry, got might get a little bit too close there. The prediction that I had with the Red Wings. I honestly think that the Red Wings might give up Zadina if it has to come to it, Joe Valeno, and a first round pick.
it doesn't make
Yeah,
sense for it
and they
doesn't
want
make
to move
sense
on
for
from
Detroit
those
to
two
do.
guys, as those two guys need a change of scenery.
Why would it not make any sense? Imagine having two first line centers in Luke. What's his name? Oh
Dylan
God,
Larkin.
Dylan Larkin and JT Miller. That is your 1-2. That would be
Yzerman's
nuts.
familiar with JT
Yeah,
Miller.
but I'm
Let's
not
go
gonna
off
Exactly.
that.
lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. If you're Detroit, and especially knowing the season that you're having right now, yes, I know he's got another year left on his contract, But if you're Detroit at the moment and you look at where you are in the standings, that's a deal that you make during the offseason and not during the regular season. The reason why I believe that is because, for a guy like JT Miller, if you're going to get traded from one team that's out of the playoffs to go to another team, I know that he doesn't have a no move clause or anything. So
Detroit will compete for a wild card spot next year.
Yeah, but not now. They're done. They're out of the playoffs, bro. There's no
yeah, essentially. But
I'm saying if you're making a deal like that, you do it in the offseason, or if you want to make that deal now, and I don't know if Detroit's really going to make it, but if they want to make that deal now, they have to get some assurances as well. And I don't know if Vancouver is going to take Zadina, in my opinion, personally. Maybe they do. But I just think that it's a move that if Detroit wants to make it, they make it during the offseason. It just makes more sense in my opinion.
I agree with that. But if there's going to be a bidding war for JT Miller, like I was going back to the Boston Bruins, you're saying that's too much to give up. But if you have a team like the New York Rangers and the Calgary Flames and Detroit who have way better assets, you're going to have to give up a deal like that in order to compete, in order to even be part of the JT Miller sweepstakes, essentially. So you're gonna have to give up in order to get,
I like JT Miller. I think he's a great. I just think Liesel and DeBrusk and the first round. If it was a first round pick and Liesel, yes. The fact that you're adding Jake DeBrusk to it, I know that he hasn't been fantastic, but he's not a bad player by any means. And I think at that point, if you're Vancouver and you get offered a first-round pick, Liesel and DeBrusk, you take that deal and you run. In my opinion, you take it and you run. Because Liesel's fantastic, and I think DeBrusk in the right system, under the right coach, can be a guy who can score 20 goals for you easily.
Look, if Pavelski doesn't hit the market and Dallas are still fighting for a spot by the time the trade deadline comes, and Giroux isn't moved, JT Miller becomes the most highly sought out forward, available at the deadline, because as of right now, it's a defensive market. It's a defense market.
Yeah.
All the top 4 players right now are all defensemen, in my opinion. There's no forward yet that stands out unless it's a guy that needs a change of scenery or a guy that wants out.
I disagree with that take too, but it's okay. Anyways, moving on to the next team.
So the next team would be the New York Rangers. So obviously, where was I here?
It'd be Kravtsov and the first.
Yeah. So my offer for them, and I don't know if they're gonna do this, because when it came to making a pitch for Jack Eichel, Buffalo wanted Braden Schneider, and they said no. They said we're not gonna move that guy. But are they gonna be? So why would they want to move him for a guy like JT Miller, who's, I would say, not as good as Jack Eichel? But if they do target him, I think he's going to be a fantastic player to pair up with Quinn Hughes on defense. And they're both going to be young. He's a 6'2", 202-pound defenseman. And putting those two young guns together, no pun intended, I think would be a fantastic duo on their defense. But essentially, I think they say no way to that, and they offer this instead: Vital Kravtsov, a first-round pick, or Philip Hiddle. Yeah.
I mean he's also that. I mean, that was the offer we kind of said also for Chychrun. So I mean, if they don't get Chychrun, they might as well go for JT Miller.
This is one thing, and I think I actually believe that this could happen, and just because I think it would make a lot of sense for Vancouver and for the Rangers as well. I could see a situation where the Rangers trade Capo Caco. Now, I know Ranger fans, calm down. I know some Ranger fans really like Capo Caco, but I personally think that it's time for him for a change of scenery. I think in New York it hasn't worked, and I think it's time for him to go somewhere else and maybe do what they have to do as well. There's also Philip Hiddle. I think he's another guy that could potentially be thrown into a deal.
Someone clipped this. He said Capo Caco is now a bust. What?
I didn't say he was a bust. That's not what I said. I said he needs to change his scenery.
He needs to change his scenery.
You put the word bust in my mouth. I have never once said that. All I said was he needs to change his scenery.
For all guys, this is like
Capo Caco needs to move on from the Rangers.
I said he needs to move on because he's not a bust. I never once said Capo Caco's a bust. I said he needs a change of scenery. And I think the other thing is too, the Rangers have so many good prospects like Kravtsov, like Nils Lundqvist, like Braden Schneider, that the Rangers can make this work very, very easily. Now, obviously, Daniel Kim suggested in the comments that the Rangers trade Nils Lundqvist, Vitaly Kravtsov, and a first-round pick. I kind of agree with that. I think that's a good move as well.
Yeah.
Daniel Kim also said Kako's a bust. Look, I never said he was a bust.
Daniel,
Okay?
you're on fire
That's
tonight.
not
think
what
Daniel,
agree
I,
with
I
everything you
agree
said.
with that statement 100%.
I personally don't. I don't think. I think you guys. I think in general people underestimate prospects, and I think sometimes a prospect either needs a change of scenery or they just need an opportunity on a different team. I think Kako's got a lot of skill. I think he's a player that can help and benefit a team as well. Look, it hasn't worked out in New York, and it hasn't been great, but I don't think he's a bust. And those words have never come out of my mouth. So I don't like that Chris is putting them in my mouth because that's just not true. All I said was he needs a change of scenery. So yeah.
So this is a good point from Brave 187. Sorry, wrong
Well, I mean,
one. I would rate the Rangers for their defensive prospects. Well, yeah, because you look at how superior Vancouver's offense is on paper, and you look at their defense. You only really have, I would say, Quinn Hughes that stands out. I mean, yeah, Ekman Larson. I think he's past his prime. He's not worth that contract, essentially. So, yeah, getting a guy like Schneider, like I was saying, would be fantastic. The thing is that if they weren't willing to give him up for Eichel, why would they be willing to give him up for JT Miller, who's not as good as Jack Eichel? Um, Something else that was interesting. Where is it? I think I have to go up.
anyways, going back to what I was saying
Yeah,
before.
wait, Luca. I just want to cover
Oh
this
yeah.
one fast. Yes, this is a very good point, and I've spoken about this before. Have spoken about this as a podcast. Um, yeah, Ryan Strome is still not signed. And JT Miller, I think, would be a fantastic, and honestly, I think he's way superior than Ryan Strome. Ryan Strome does well at the Rangers because I think his chemistry with Panarin is off the charts. But JT Miller overall is a better player. So right there, they upgrade while also adding more depth to an already stacked offense that Rangers have, and ultimately, I would say, it makes them top three when looking at the best offensive teams in the league. And that's going to push them to go for a very deep playoff run, in my opinion. But if Strom fails to re-sign, at least they have Miller signed to an extra year. So I think that works for the Rangers, honestly. I think it would be a good swap in while still having both players on the team, at least for the rest of this season, heading into the playoffs and then eventually the postseason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think I'm going to say one last thing about the Rangers. The Rangers have a plethora of defensive prospects. They have a plethora of guys that can, play in their future. Obviously, they've got Adam Fox and Jacob Trouba. Keandre Miller looks really good as well. So they've got guys that I think can definitely, be a part of the Rangers system for a long time. So a guy like Nils Lundqvist, in my opinion, is someone that's really interesting, and I think Vancouver may look at. Maybe Vancouver turns around and says, well, we'll do something like Braden Schneider. I don't know if the Rangers move Braden Schneider. I think they want to see what they've got with him.
I don't think so either.
But definitely a guy like Nils Lundqvist could be an interesting option. And obviously with Kravtsov there too.
And Hiddle too.
Potentially asking, or Hiddle potentially asking for a trade. You've got two guys there that could potentially be on the move. I personally think that if you're Vancouver, maybe you explore the Kakko thing. Look, I think he's still got potential, Kakko. I think he's still a great player. So I think if you're Vancouver, maybe you decide, you know what, we'll see what Kakko can do over here. So there's that. But obviously the Rangers, they've already got a really good offense. I think if they add JT Miller, they can legitimately probably win the cup.
Their power play would be fantastic.
I think they're one of the favorites to win the cup if they add a guy like JT Miller. And already they've got great goals.
They already are one of the favorites, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think if you add JT Miller, you pretty much you could arguably say they're top two. I think right now they're probably top 5, but I think if they get a guy like JT Miller, they're probably top 2, top 3. What I mean by that is I think Florida and Colorado are the only 2 teams that are better than them with JT Miller. If they don't add JT Miller, I think they're top 5, top 6.
Yeah, but I also want to add the Hurricanes in Minnesota. I know a lot of Minnesota fans are stating that, and actually we're going to talk about them in a second. Minnesota fans are saying, why did we mention that they're underdogs? Well, look, because when you look at the media and how they showcase Minnesota, they don't put them in the same category as the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Colorado, the Maple Leafs, and whatever. But we do have to admit that Minnesota is indeed a top five team, and they're playing like a top five team. So they have all the tools essentially to go for a Stanley Cup run this year. But the thing is that um, even if they don't win this year, they still have next year and the year after that because they're a very young team and they have something very special in place with good management and a good coaching staff. So
Here's where I disagree with that. Young team, yeah, but all the great players that are that are performing right now, that are making it a top team, they're all vets,
not
essentially.
no look, Fiala's not that old. Zuccarello, yes, he's 36, but adding a guy like
Boldy's playing
JT
Corello,
Miller,
fantastic.
Spurgeon.
Boldy's playing
I'm just saying
fantastic.
most of the main guys that are playing well, that are producing, are older.
But I think I think if you're
they're
Minnesota,
essentially in their late 20s, but it's not like the end
Early
of their
30s.
career. Okay, yeah, a little bit
they're
too,
really
but
not. No, I'm sorry.
they could still play. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
Eriksson Ek is really young,
yeah,
still young. Kaprizov's young. Fiala's young. Boldy's playing really well, and he's young too. Ryan Hartman's relatively young in terms of the Rangers, in terms of the Wild and their players. I think adding a guy like JT Miller
Listen, you,
in
well,
Minnesota makes a lot of sense in the sense that I think Minnesota could use a guy like him,
it's a good fit, but
especially
they're
at
not gonna
center
do it. They're not gonna do
especially
it.
at center. But I think Minnesota right now, I don't know, they're trying to be a little bit more conservative in my opinion,
Yeah,
because I think they also need to,
they don't want to ruin the
keep in mind.
chemistry. They want to roll with the team
Yeah,
they
but
have right
not
now.
only that.
They have a very deep prospect pool. There's some guys that are older in age that
Yeah, but not only
easily some of
that.
those guys could, replace those older guys within the next 2 to 3 years. So I don't think they really want to move too much. I think they're going to add depth, essentially.
They also have no cap space for the
Yeah,
next 2 3 years.
yeah, and that's a big part because of the Sutter and Parise buyouts.
There
So
you go.
yeah, they have to be very conservative. They're gonna add depth pieces. I don't think they should touch the chemistry. I think they're a very good team as of right now and moving forward, and hopefully there's good things to come for Minnesota and their fans. But I think despite Minnesota being interested, I don't want to really get into it because I mean there's really not much to say because I just don't see like realistically, yes, there's a fit because they've been wanting a top center for the longest time, but are they willing to pay the price? No, they're not. So I just want to
Uh,
move on from Minnesota. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add about
no,
Minnesota, but I
I
wanted
don't.
to. Okay, so again, Colorado's been attached to Giroux and Pavelski, and what's the thing they have in common? They play the wing and they play center. So why not Colorado going after and offering a deal for JT Miller with Vancouver? So I think they would offer, and here's my, and maybe this is a little bit too much. I think this is kind of crazy. No first round pick, just Alex Newhook and Tyson Jost. That's it for JT Miller. Those two prospects.
You see, that one makes more sense than the Boston and Liesel and the Brusque one, and I'm gonna tell you why. New Hook's really good. Like New Hook is really, really good. Okay. Jost hasn't really lived up to expectations for when he was drafted, but I still think he's a good third line guy who can help Vancouver out a lot. New Hook for me, if he gets if that's the route they decide to go, if Colorado decides to go get a guy like JT Miller, I think Newhook's a fantastic player. So I genuinely believe that Newhook makes more sense than getting the first round pick. And the reason why I think that is because you're essentially trading a second round pick if you get JT Miller, because Colorado's pick's going to probably be 28 to 32nd, right? Most likely. And so if you go and trade a guy like JT Miller to a guy like Colorado and they give you Alex Newhook, well, now you've got Pedersen and Newhook and Bo Horvat. You've got three centers there that are all going to be really good. Bo Horvat, yes, he's a little bit on the older
But you
side.
have a young core already, and like Chris was
That's it.
saying,
But
JT Miller is the
Newhook
oldest guy
makes sense.
within their core. So getting
I
Josh and
don't think
Newhook,
Colorado trades Newhook though. I don't think
yeah,
Colorado trades
but
Newhook.
essentially, I think that would be the best offer out of from all the teams
Yeah,
that we've mentioned.
yeah, because
And I would take that deal.
Bowen Byram, there's uncertainty there because he hasn't played and he's dealing with concussion problems, whatever. So there's no guarantees with him. But I don't know if they trade Alex
I
Newhook.
didn't
I don't
say
think
Bowen
Colorado's
Byron
willing to
though.
do that.
I said
No, I know,
Tyson
but
Duff
I'm
and
saying
Alex
like I'm
Newhook.
giving examples of other prospects that Colorado has
Oh, okay, okay,
that
okay,
are
okay.
highly touted. But I'm saying
Well,
Bowen
I mean, there's
Byram
Sam
is one that I
Girard
don't.
that wants to leave too. I don't know if that would be a good
I
maybe
don't know. I don't
trade
think he
piece.
open said he wanted to
I
leave,
don't think
but
he
I know
wants
there
to
was
leave, but I
rumors.
think
Well, I
he
mean,
would be
or
open to a
something.
bigger role on a team. Right now you're playing behind um, Taves and Makar. So a guy like Gerard, I think he does fit the top
But
four.
I think if you trade Gerard, you trade if you're gonna do a deal like that, you trade him in the offseason and not during the season, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
Why
Right now,
why trade one of your best defensemen
Well, I'm just saying. I
to the
heard that
Denver Broncos?
he was willing to leave, or I don't remember
no,
how long ago I
There
heard
was a
that.
no
rumor.
mention that he's been willing to leave, but he's been tied to a lot of rumors.
That's what I was.
Um, he's been tied to a lot of rumors as like as trade bait, essentially to go get a center that plays the wing as well. So when talking about Giroux, Pavelski, and now Miller, it seems like that's what they're aiming for. They're aiming for a center that could also play the wing. But I think Giroux is the more likely fit out of than three, and you could check out why in our trade destinations video for Giroux. The last team, and again, I
This is
think
the one I want to talk about.
this is an unlikely fit in my
No,
opinion.
I disagree, but go.
Um, okay, so if the Calgary Flames that are reported to be interested in JT Miller, were to make an offer for JT Miller, based on the current and future cap space situation, a guy like a significant player like JT Miller, they would have to give up a significant player. So, in my opinion, if they make a deal with the Vancouver Canucks, the Calgary Flames are going to have to give up a guy like Sean Monahan, who hasn't, honestly, I think fell out of favor in Calgary. It did not exceed or fulfill expectations. And he, right over the years, he regressed, in my opinion, and he's currently getting paid 6.73 million, and his contract ends the same year as JT Miller in 2022, 2023.
6.3 million.
I
So
have 6.73 million. I don't know. But essentially,
it's
he
six
gets
point
paid.
three seven. It's
Three
6.375.
375. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right, here's how I see it, okay? And this is why I wanted to talk about Calgary because I think Calgary is an underrated team that not a lot of people talk about. They've got a really good prospect in Jacob Peltier. Now, I know that a lot of Calgary fans may no, don't trade Jacob Peltier because he's really, really good. He's had a fantastic season in the AHL. I think this guy's gonna be good in the NHL too. But here's the thing that I see. Sean Monahan, it gives the other example that we were talking about before. The question is, I don't know if Vancouver takes on more cap when they have a guy who makes less cap. That's the only thing that I think is going to happen. So I think if you're Vancouver, because Calgary needs to make the money work, and I think Vancouver may look at a different option. Maybe they go for a guy like Dylan Dubé, right? Or maybe they go for a defenseman and they go for a guy like Nikita Zadorov. Now, I'm not saying those guys are the big pieces in the deal. The big piece in the deal is Jacob Peltier and the first round pick. But I'm saying because Calgary needs to move cap in order for JT Miller to make it work, maybe they go for a guy like Nikita Zadorov, who makes $3.7 million. He's still 26. I know that, some people don't really rate him as a defenseman, but I think in terms of making the cap work, and it's for 1 year, so you don't have to resign him at the end of the season if you don't want to, I think it makes sense for both teams. I think the reason why I think Calgary makes sense is because adding a guy like JT Miller puts them in a really good spot offensively. And not only that, I think Calgary can be a team that, can be one of those underdog teams in the playoffs. And I think they can surprise a lot of people with how well they've played in the sense that, they've got a really good team and they're one of the best defensive teams in the league. So I think that one kind of makes sense. It may be unlikely, but to me, I would
It's
love
unlikely because of the
Miller.
cap space, and look
Yeah,
who's available as free agents this year. You have Johnny Gaudreau, who's a free agent. You have Matthew Tkachuk, Andrew Mangiapane, and Oliver Clinton, who are set to be
but
restricted free
let
agents.
me tell you this. So
Here's
here's
you want to know. Here's what I think is gonna happen. I think the deal that Luca's talking about, 100% agree with it. If they get rid of somehow Michael Backlund,
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I think Michael Backlund
I think
would be a good guy to trade
I
in a deal
think
like
I
this.
think what they should do is they get rid of Backlund and I don't know, a second and a third, give it to a rebuilding team that has cap space, and give him away for future considerations, which we all know is like a bag of pucks.
I don't agree with that. I'm gonna tell you why. Backlund's
Well, you get $5.9 million off your cap space.
yeah, but
You get to replace that in the end with your deal, and you get JT Miller,
yeah.
and then after that you can make moves to re-sign
So-
all your other guys.
so-
And getting JT Miller will entice players like Tkachuk and
But
Gaudreau to stay.
what I'm saying is this, right? And you were talking, Chris, you were talking about the cap space issue before. Now, here's where my thing is, right? So adding Dubé or Zadorov kind of makes the cap space work. Vancouver may even be willing to retain a little bit if they feel like it, whatever. The point that I'm trying to make is this, okay? If you get JT Miller, because he's got a year left on his contract, you can then turn around in the offseason after the playoffs are done and trade Sean Monahan. Because there's been a lot of talks about Sean Monahan being traded and Daryl Sutter not really liking him as a player or his
It's been a
fit. 'cause they
couple of
don't think
years
he's
now.
the
I
fit.
just don't see him as a
I
fit
just
in
think
Calgary.
if you bring in Miller, especially now, even if it's for a playoff run, you can deal Sean Monahan in the offseason, and there's your cap problem settled because you just traded a
Look,
guy who's
they're
$1
gonna have to
million
move
more than
cap
before.
space to make this deal happen. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to get too much into it because it's
No, I
literally
think
mind-boggling right now. But
Yeah.
they're gonna have to work some magic to fit in a guy like JT Miller under contract and make sure that the other guys that I mentioned before that are signed. So, one last question before we end today's episode. Where does he sign? Where does he get traded? And if he gets traded, where does he go?
I think there's two teams. Calgary's one that I would like to see him get traded to, but I don't think he will, or I think it's unlikely a little bit too. But for me, the Rangers makes a whole lot of sense because they've got the best assets to give up. But you know what? I would also like to see him, in a Bruins jersey. I think in a Bruins jersey, he would look really good too. And I think the Bruins would be a much better team with him on it. Mind you, I think any team would be a much better team with him on it.
Yeah.
But I think the Bruins or the Rangers are two teams that I really, really like for him. I would have said Minnesota, but I don't think Minnesota makes that deal because I think they're in a lot of other cap issues and there's a lot of other things going on in Minnesota. I think they're going to stay put. So I think Boston and the Rangers make the most amount of sense, but it could be Colorado too. So I don't know. Colorado seems to surprise a lot of
And
people.
Chris, very quickly, who's your pick?
Either the New York Rangers listen, I think that Detroit, if they are willing to get him, I think they have a chance, but New York Rangers would be the realistic and most likely
Yeah,
scenario.
I agree with that. I'm gonna go with Chris on this one. My number one pick is the New York Rangers, just because of the spot they're in, who they're willing to give up.
Yeah.
And potentially replacing Strome if he decides not to resign. And honestly, I see that as an upgrade. And Detroit would be my second pick because, again, they have a crap ton of picks and prospects available. And there's two notable prospects, just like the Rangers, who need a change of scenery. And Yzerman stated before, and we've seen what he's done in the last couple months, that he's not afraid to make big moves. So we'll see what happens there. But we just wanted to say thank you so much, guys, for watching this episode. Let us know what your thoughts. Does JT Miller get traded? Does he stay? And where does he go? And if there's any trade proposals that you guys have, make sure to write that in the comment section below. But until then, we just wanted to say thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video and share it to anybody that is a Vancouver fan or any fans of the teams that we've spoken about today. But until the next episode, have a good one.